Welcome, everyone, to this week's broadcast of Ascend TV, live on the autism spectrum. I'm your co-host, Keith Halperin.
And I'm your co-host, Will Burnick.
And today our guest is Brian Bertrand, and he is going to be discussing autism and wrestling. But before we get into that, Will, what's your shirt today?
For this week's shirt, I'm wearing my USF shirt. Tonight, USF is having their last soccer game of the season. Everyone who goes to USF or supports USF is going to cheer them on tonight for their final game. After that, USF starts their basketball season.
Thank you very much, Will. Would you like to introduce our guest?
Today, our guest will be Brian Bertrand of Autism, talking about autism and wrestling. He's going to be talking about the connections about autism and wrestling. Brian, can you tell us about your involvement in wrestling?
Yeah, my involvement in wrestling goes all the way back to 2004. I first got into it by doing some training, but since that didn't work out in the ring, I looked for ways to get outside of the ring. So I started doing camera work for some local shows, and I eventually became a commentator for pro wrestling, which is very fun. And I've also become a promoter for Rival Forge Wrestling. So I've been kind of like all over the backstage area a little bit.
Tell us about your investment in the autism community.
The autism community, I feel, I've had a lot of autistic friends, and I wanted to try and get them involved with my side of the wrestling business. I know a lot of people in the autistic community are big fans, WWE, AEW, all the mainstream stuff. And I have since brought a couple of people that I knew for a very long time into my team. Of course, Matthew and Stacey. They've been really helpful, and I've easily wanted to get as many people on the team as possible, and I think the autistic community actually has a lot of good potential.
Tell us about some of the connections you see with autism and wrestling.
When it comes to wrestling and getting a connection to it, it's the same thing. Usually, history has shown like Make-A-Wish kids at the worst case scenario, or having wrestlers connect with kids, having fun, doing autograph signings and things like that. And for those that come out, I can actually give you a great example. Kirk White's Big Time Wrestling in Newark, California. Bret the Hitman Hart comes out there all the time. He's a big Bay Area, friendly Bay Area visitor. He loves the sports out here, and he'll come to this little promotion in Newark, autograph signings, charity events, big matches, big signings, and all that. There's a good connection with that. And when it comes to the autistic community, having that extra time in case someone's having a sensory issue or anything, there's always safety precautions in that. But then also getting that fan interaction for sure. That there's really good connection there, and it creates new fans, creates new heroes at the same time.
So, Brian, when did wrestling first grab you? Was it one match, one moment, or did you sort of sneak up on you?
It sort of came to me naturally when my dad sat me down in front of the TV, and wouldn't you know it, WWF Saturday Night's Main Event was on, and Hulk Hogan coming out, big match, and I was hooked ever since. I've watched everything grow up from the early days of the 80s all the way to now, and it's been a ride. There's plenty of podcasts and YouTube videos that will highlight it. It's different when you watch it live. I can tell you that much for sure. But I've been hooked since very young. Absolutely.
Stacey, I understand you have a question or two for our guest.
Being that I worked with, or Matthew and I have worked with Brian, I did help with some filming or so. And actually, let me try and simplify it. What is the positive stimulation that you've seen those on the spectrum get out of, like others on the spectrum get out of, like outside of the ring?
So one thing I've learned about wrestling is that starting with inside, every wrestler is an introvert. Every single one of them. Some of them are breaking that out in a more athletic way, the training and all that. Some of them are getting over trauma. Some of them are living in trauma. And they're managing it that way. People come from all walks of life when it comes to wrestling, but that's been the main sort of common denominator, if you will. But with wrestling, they do as far as like as far as outside of the ring goes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of creativity there, a lot of ideas. It could go from simple writing to like storylines if they can get involved that way, or all the way up to stage design, production, handling streams, live chat moderation if you want to do that. There's a lot of different kinds of like jobs that I fully believe that the autistic community can not only benefit to the wrestling industry, but the wrestling industry can contribute to the autistic community in that regard. There's a lot of great stuff.
And considering that there are those on the spectrum who do wrestle themselves because because it feels good to them, and not just because of the physicality, but the storytelling, and also just because of, like you said, they're releasing trauma. How much of a percent would you say of joy that they get out of it?
That all depends, of course, on the independent level, which is what I usually watch more than anything. The one thing you got to remember on that side is that most of them are still students and
Yeah.
they're learning and they're having fun. So you're seeing a bit of a change as far as the athletic side. So you have a lot of so they can get a lot of good joy out of that. But one thing I do know is that when it comes to putting out a good sort of match, crowd size can be a major factor during the COVID era, which is what we call it. Of course, it was during the COVID pandemic. Everyone's indoors. There was times where wrestling promotion on the mainstream that had any sort of streaming or TV deal, they had to improvise. You could tell in one instance where there was no crowd noise. There's just a lot of video screens everywhere. That was it. And you can tell based on that, the performance seemed low. And that can happen to anybody. And I would imagine it would be tough because you're not getting that immediate reaction. So what I learned was the bigger the crowd, the bigger the live crowd, the easier it is to take that step beyond, to rise up and get that feeling of putting on these big performances, these huge matches, insane moment. So it all comes down to that. It also comes down to like the atmosphere of the venue itself. So there's different factors in it, but usually the more you hear a crowd, the easier it gets. That's the one thing I've learned with some really good wrestling.
Thank you again, Brian, and thank you, Stacey. Our book correspondent, Jennifer Brooks, has a question for our guest now.
Yes, Brian, I'd like to ask you about sensory sensitivities, which are common for people on the spectrum, and you'd think wrestling would be incompatible with that, being in such close contact with someone else's body in a noisy gym, often under bright lights. You'd think that would be a sensory nightmare. So, how do we make that work?
You're absolutely right. When it comes to sort of the independent level of wrestling, you're not going to have certain aspects to handle the sensory overload. Usually, the solution to get around that, step outside, get some fresh air, come on back whenever you're ready. But then you miss part of the show. I've seen smaller promotions set up an area with a screen with the live camera and put the show on that way. But the major ones now, for a few years, there's a company called Culture City that helped set up the sensory booth for autistic community and for the autistic community, and it has of course a TV screen in there, but it soundproofs a lot of not soundproof, but it muffles a lot of the sound, so that way it kind of like that rest that you can rest yourself a bit from all that, because yeah, the pyro, the music, the noise, all that, that would definitely be a sensory nightmare. And I know wrestlers are a very supportive community on their own. Of course, they're trusting each other with their bodies, their mental issues and things like that. So they can set aside and help each other that way, as well as these sensory booths. So there's a lot of stuff that are going through that. So there's a lot of but there's always a need for awareness of that. Absolutely. Especially at indie shows.
Thank you, Brian and Jennifer. Will, back to you for some more questions for our guest.
What has been your favorite event, wrestling event to go to outside of autism?
Man, I've been to so many. My favorite one so far has been New Japan Pro Wrestling. They come out to San Francisco Bay Area a lot. Uh, New Japan Pro Wrestling's Battle in the Valley 2024. Luke Perry makes a return. I bring all my friends. It was a blast. And I have many, many pictures I could give for that to you as well.
Tell us about the wrestling culture in the Bay Area.
Yeah, so the Bay Area has a bit of an underground culture when it comes to it. A lot of people love their hardcore graphic violence stuff. But there are some really good wrestling promotions in the Bay Area. I just mentioned one, Kirk White's Big Time Wrestling in Newark, at the Newark Pavilion. Very good. They have, let's see, another one, Stars of Wrestling in Alameda is another good one. SCW, no, they're not. SCW is not there anymore. If you're wanting to go outside of the Bay Area, there's also great ones in the Sacramento area that you can check out, as SPW in Elk Grove, and Big Ugly Dojo over in Daly City. I definitely recommend that. There's so many good ones. A site I recommend to get a calendar for events is indiedependent.com. Just a big shout out to them. They're really good little 2-person team that can give you all sorts of great events. But usually the Newark Pavilion, Mount Pleasant High School, if you're into the Mexican luchador flying through the air, flipping and all that. Pro Wrestling Revolution, Mount Pleasant High School. That's another one I just thought of right now. Definitely check them out. They're really good.
First of all, are you aware of any pro wrestlers who have identified as being on the spectrum?
Actually, yes. World-class wrestler in AEW right now, Will Ospreay, has been on the spectrum. He's publicly said that quite a bit. I think he's one of the main ones I know of. I know Drew McIntyre in WWE says he's on the spectrum. As far as I can remember, I can't think of any more than that off the top of my head. But usually what I recommend is you can find many wrestlers that do these interviews that will talk about their personal lives and how connected they are to the spectrum. There's quite a bit you'd be surprised to find. Like, even though I can't think of any off the top of my head, it's only because I couldn't find much on. I just can't remember, but there are definitely there. Like I said, Will Ospreay is the one I can remember off the top of my head, and he's done so many amazing matches in Japan, in the UK, and he's one guy I would absolutely recommend watching for sure.
I understand that you did some wrestling yourself now that you're more involved in promotion, but how did you get into it? And what does it take to get actually into wrestling from a performance
I mean, it basically the spark that got it was for me was Beyond the Mat, the wrestling documentary. If you remember, they did a lot of. There was the first third of the movie took place at the APW boot camp garage in Hayward, California, and they showed like basically the first levels of that. And once I learned where it was, I called them up and I talked to the promoter then, and we just had a chat on wrestling, and he sold me on learning to do that stuff, and the rest is history. It was a big investment. My friend and I joined up, and we put in, so we went through the cardio. And with wrestling, when it comes to the training side, there's a lot of cardio. You're blown up by, you're full of hot air in the chest by the time you're in your second hour of the class, and you haven't done the mile yet. So there's a lot of intensive training, high intensity, sort of uh, physically active stuff. It takes a lot to do that, so it can get a little daunting. And then when you actually get in the ring, you're doing drills, you're constantly falling on your back or your stomach and all that, and you're just out of it. But when it comes to learning the moves with that warm up in mind, you have to stay trained. It's an athletic kind of sport in that way, and it takes a ton of discipline. So getting in the door is basically a demonstration of how passionate you are with the business and how much you know, because that's just getting to the school, getting to that part of it. But when you're in the business, when you switch over to promotions and all that, it becomes the same old. It's not what you know, it's who you know, and you're learning from that the hard way all the time. If you're in a bigger spot, say say an indie promotion, but with more money behind it, there's more structure to it. I always try and pride myself on keeping the structure intact. So when it comes to autistic community, we can delegate jobs and I know they'd be able to handle it. I know certain people I can delegate to will be able to handle it.
Excellent.
Matthew's a perfect example of that. I'll say that for sure. Of
Got one more two-part question for you, Brian. You say,
course.
first of all, when you were in the ring, what did you most enjoy about it? And secondly, now that you're promoting it, what do you most enjoy about promoting?
In the ring, my favorite exercise was running the ropes, because you can't run it normally. You have to take bigger steps to measure out how far you are from the opposite side of the ropes. So going off that, and then you get that satisfying kind of like bump off the ropes, and it hurts at first, like the first few times you do it, but then going off and getting that momentum and doing it, and you're realizing you're gradually going a little bit faster than you should be. So that there's always that challenge of stopping. But that was always fun to me. Um, Being able to like go through the demonstrations and learning about the moves is always fun, even though it really hurt. Uh, but when it came to promotion, it came to me almost naturally, because I know the training of what they go through, what they have to go through from the very beginning to, doing the journeyman thing and getting belts and doing these higher expectations. So I've always thought of it as it being presented as a gladiator match, in a way, like that sort of, like they know the styles they're supposed to be doing, and you're presenting it like the rock stars that they are. And that's how promotion should always be done, is no matter who it is, treat them like rock stars. Treat them, they're the guys going into the ring and putting on these matches. So you need to put you meet with me as a commentator, as a promoter, as a graphic designer. They need to be that center of attention, and that's basic. That plays into their whole persona and everything. So that's been my favorite part, is making them feel like rock stars.
Thank you again, Brian. Well, I believe you have a final question for our guest.
Yes, I do. Brian, do you recommend these wrestling events to other members of the autism community?
Yeah, I absolutely recommend it to everybody, autism community, outside of that. But for sure, autism community, I recommend going to an indie show and seeing these guys perform at that level. I would recommend letting letting some of the staff members know that, if it's a severe case, they'll accommodate. They always want to be able to have as many eyes on them as possible. So if you're in the autistic community, you need some help, let someone know at a show, they'll help you out. That's been usually the case. And the fans, the wrestlers, everybody there is very supportive of each other. So no matter what, someone will be there to help anyone out that's having any issue.
Well, thank you again, Will and Brian. Now, if our viewers want to find out more about what you're doing and also be more about wrestling in general, what's the best way to contact you and other resources?
I do a video podcast called Hard Way, a pro wrestling story, over on YouTube. So if you search for that, Hard Way, a pro wrestling story, you'll see my podcast there. We're gonna start getting on the big channels on that soon once we start back up again. I also recommend, if you want to know sort of like a more comedic side of wrestling, I recommend Botchamania on YouTube. And if you have if you want to like have a long form commentary of that, the best one I've seen was OSW Review. They're based in Ireland, but they usually put on full commentary if you want to learn about wrestling and learn about the fans' perspective and different versions of that. There's a whole history that you can definitely look up on.
Excellent. And thank you again, Brian Bertrand. We'll now hear from Jennifer Brooks, our book correspondent.
Well, thank you, Keith. You've just heard a fascinating discussion about wrestling. So now I would like to tell you about martial art on the spectrum. This is written by Al Loren. He is local to Marin County, and he has been teaching martial arts of all sorts: karate, kung fu, aikido, tai chi, and jiu-jitsu to people both on and off the spectrum for many decades here in the North Bay area. And he has written a nice short book with nice short chapters for those of us who appreciate those sorts of things. And yeah, it's all about the benefits of participation in martial arts for those off the spectrum, but especially on the spectrum. It can improve, physical fitness, coordination, reflexes, and that's in the physical domain. And then in the mental domain, it can help with things like endurance and focus. And in the social domain, well, no, it's not going to automatically make someone socially savvy who isn't, but it does provide benefits because it can, be around other people with similar interests, and that can be the basis for a meaningful friendship. And of course, yes, self-defense is also important, especially since people on the spectrum tend to attract bullies like magnets. Yeah, they're all easy targets. So yeah, it can improve confidence if they feel strong and that they can defend themselves against that. So yes, there are many benefits. And so yes, parents, if you have a child on the spectrum and your child shows interest in martial arts, then yes, definitely recommend and getting them involved in it. And that's all for today. Tune in next time.
Thank you again, as always, Jennifer. We'll now hear from Stacey Kennedy, our cultural correspondent.
Hello, everybody. Today, a couple of the things I'd like to share with my cultural report is Sunday, December 14th, and it's not quite the holidays yet, but it's getting there, and I would be glad to share about what the San Francisco Davies Symphony Hall will be having. It will be having a symphony youth orchestra perform Peter and the Wolf, and everyone, of course, of all ages and all special needs families are welcomed. Not only all is welcomed, but every family of special needs individuals can be seated together on the second, as they say, the second tier or so. Oh, and maybe to throw in what Peter and the Wolf is about, I actually used to watch it a lot. It's a tale of a boy and his animal friends of bravery brought to life of defending themselves or so with him from a wolf or so. And I take it it's a lesson in life recognition of how you can defend yourself from bullies, etc. But of course, this is a tale about a boy defending himself from a wolf, and he's got friends to back him up about it. And so, anyways, that is again December 14th, Sunday, Davies Symphony Hall. Oh shoot, the time of it, but you can look up at the website. So other thing I like to share is there's this nonprofit organization within the Bay Area too called Bay Area Autism Collective. They have virtual meetups on Zoom. In fact, one in particular is every Sunday starting at 7 p.m. It's for adult community autism, obviously for to help open up and unmask and let out your authentic selves outside of the neuroformative expectations of society. That can all be let go of, and we just be ourselves. This group meets, well, yeah, like I said, on Zoom, but but it is free of charge. You can, when people meet, obviously you can eat, you can drink, you can stim, you can multitask. In fact, yeah, there's no limitations whatsoever. And I would say that is a very supportive group, and it's also something that could turn into a fun thing, obviously, too. Not only do they, sorry, scratch that. This same group, and the last thing I'll share, the same group also has a monthly thing for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming individuals. And it's every third Thursday of the month. And so to look up more information and for scheduling or so on, you would go to Bay Area Autism Collective website and so on. And again, that is Bay Area Autism Collective, and they have virtual meetups. Thank you.
Everyone, this is the end of our show. I'm your co-host, Keith Halperin.
I'm your co-host, Will Burnick.
I'm your cultural correspondent, Stacey Kennedy.
And I'm your book reviewer, Jennifer Brooks.
And I'm Brian Bertrand.
Thank you, everyone. Until next time, stay well and stay healthy.